Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode number 1 of The Last Transmission with me, Chris Turner. First of all, apologies for last week. For those of you that know me, I was a little bit under the weather, and I thought rather than try and get through it, coughing and spluttering everywhere, I'm still not 100%, and I might mute myself a little bit tonight because I've still got a bit of a cough, but we're raring to go tonight. So who else on a Wednesday night is going to join me to hold my hand through the launch episode on this, other than my mate, top UK researcher, best-selling author. Welcome to the show, Paul Sinclair.
Thank you very much, Chris. And do you know something? I'm absolutely honoured and thrilled that you've asked me to do first show with you. And
well, you've got the experience. You've got the experience now. You've got all my hand through this. This has been 2 years me talking about it, and eventually I'll get there. I mean, I'm busy. I'm like yourself. I'm really, really busy with work and other projects and everything else, but it is something that I really wanted to do for such a long time. And I know so many people and so many great guests, that some that do get on to podcasts, others that don't get onto the podcasts. So, I know you've got piles of research, and also what's quite important at this moment in time for you, and this is probably where I want to start, we'll start the show, is talking about Truth Proof 4. And the fact that it's been number one, for 4 weeks now? So
no, about 8 weeks.
8 weeks, really?
And Mary took a screen capture last night and put it on. I mean, I'm kind of thrilled to bits. You're bound to be, aren't you? Because the amount of effort you've put in to putting these things together, not without a lot of help from people like Don, yourself. I mean, you're to thank for cover, and Chris Wright, Les. And Amanda, there's so many people that I can thank, because you put a book out there and you can hold it up and say, I've written this for a lot of people in background, and everybody that's contributed with their accounts, because without them, there wouldn't be a book. So when I get to my point, she did that last night, and it's been removed now, as in it must only have a lifespan as a new release for, I would have thought, 6 to 8 weeks. Right. We're glad she did it last night, because now it's just number 8 in the general genre, which is, I think it's doing well, because it's not got a paperback to back it up as well. It's just doing that in Kindle, because, as you know, paperbacks are on my website. But yeah, all good. Last book for a while.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. So we've discussed this in length before, and I've spoken to a few friends that have got so much information and they should write a book, but they never write a book, because you told me a number of times it's quite a painful process writing a book.
It is.
The amount of effort involved, I think people underestimate. I do. I mean, I've never done it, but I can imagine that it's pretty tough to compile all that information and get it in print.
It's mammoth, and I have other people to thank, not for writing it, but for getting it in print, such as Don, such as Amanda, for helping me get all that together. But the actual hours, it's unbelievable, and I was so relieved to get it over with, especially as we're doing Wolflands, because and massive kind of family commitments, as everybody who will watch this has. It was just a massive relief. It was like an anvil being lifted off me, I must admit, because I'm so glad it's out and done. And it's not that I'm saying there's not another book, because there definitely will be. There'll be more than another. And I've got a folder just crammed with information already. There must be 20,000 words of people's accounts, which I haven't even started to write up. And audio recordings of people that have allowed me to record them. So I've got every detail I can. Got an incredible account last night. Absolutely unbelievable. I spoke to these people probably for, I don't know, an hour and a quarter, and I plan to visit them next week. And
can you tell us a bit about that? Not just now, but can you talk about that or not?
I can do, yeah. I'm not going to give the names out or the exact location, but it's just, and it's an account that's not even got a sighting. It's in these people live out in the sticks. I'll not be as not accurate. I'll not be as detailed with the information until I've kind of digested it myself and started to write it up.
Cool. And, yeah, that's fine.
But I do plan on speaking to them tomorrow, and I hope they're listening, because I want to do them justice for what they told me. And they live out in the sticks in East Yorkshire. That's as close as we'll go at the moment. And they're laid in bed. House is quite isolated. They tell me they've got I think it was a Lakeland Terrier. And it's got a routine, this dog. It sleeps on bed sort of between them. If you want me to go with this for 2 minutes, Chris,
go for it, mate. Yeah.
And it when they go to bed on a night, that's where it settles, and that's what it does. And it kind of, when they get up in the morning, it leaves the bedroom when they leave the bedroom, and nothing's different. And this particular night, they go to bed, and the dog stands on the bottom of the bed. You know how it comes up on, we'll call it the oak beds and things. I can kind of picture it myself. With its 2 front paws looking out of the window. They said the windows are quite low down, and the dog's just fixed. It's dark. They're in the middle of nowhere, literally in the middle of nowhere. And I don't mean there's forests all around them, but they're in the middle of nowhere. There is some woodland and various places, and it's looking, and they tell it to come on, settle down. It wouldn't. And it's doing it. And they're kind of not nervous, but it's an outer character for this dog. Plus the fact that they're keen to stress that this dog was fiercely loyal and very protective of them, even though like Lakeland Terrier, Jack Russells, they don't realise the size, do they? I'm in fight, no matter how big it is. I want to be involved in this, but the dog's it's out of character. And then a long way away in the distance, they hear a noise that they can't quite explain. They hear I said, I bet I know kind of noise it's going to sound like, because there's been a noise like this heard in Danesdyke, and I've heard similar noises when I've been watching YouTube documentaries and things, and people are describing certain things. And I said, did it sound a cross between a basset hound, a beagle, a bloodhound, and a cockerel, all mixed into one? Seriously. And they said, well, kind of. But she says, but it was so powerful, and it were a long way away. But because they know the land, just like, excuse me, just like you, Chris, and anybody listening to this, if you're laid in bed on a night and you hear a certain creak on a floorboard or a door handle, you know where it is in your house.
Yeah.
You know, you can identify these things. These people living out in the sticks, they could identify just about where this noise came from, and they knew it were a certain bit of woodland, quite a long way away, and it let out this God Almighty scream. A short time later, we're not talking half an hour, we're talking a short time later, they know it's in another field, and it's done it again. They can hear this terrible, terrifying, howling scream of something really powerful. There's deer around them, there's badger around them, there's fox. The country people, they've heard this all the time, and I hope they're listening, because I hope I'm doing this justice, because normally I think about what I'm going to say, because it's the first time I'd heard it last night. So a short time later, it's in field in front of their house, and it's let out this. It says, and there's neighbouring villages a mile away, I don't know, 500 yards, 2 miles away, and all the dogs in the neighbourhood are barking and howling and making noises, and they can hear this because they're in the middle of nowhere, and it's in field in front of their home. And now, she said, the dog's still stood there, never making a noise. Normally he's yap, 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 and he'd be going, and he's fixed, and he's not made a noise. And she doesn't know if her husband's awake, and she just reaches out and touches his hand, and he holds her hand, and he says, yeah, I can hear it. So, and they're laid there, absolutely rigid. And the next thing, it says there's gravel on the drive, but the gravel's old gravel. Let me just check that door, because the phone's ringing. Sorry about that. The gravel's old gravel, meaning it's not sort of 4 or 5 inch deep, and you'd hear as a car comes up, it crunches. None of that. It's sort of more dirt and gravel. The next thing, they hear it walking up the drive. It's that heavy, it's crunching the gravel. They can hear the gravel crunching. Husband says, I haven't locked the front door.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Push the sideboard up to the bedroom door if this thing comes in. They've not seen it, but they're absolutely terrified, and it's banging around the property. The dog's never moved. So basically, in a nutshell, there'll be more to the story when I've spoke to them more. You've got it in a 5 to 10 minute segment. So
Yeah.
I've not seen a thing. And I know that it leaves it wide open. You're going to get people saying, well, maybe it's a beast. Maybe it's a horse that's just jumped from one field or jumped to another. But I'm on about something to make the impact on that driveway.
Yeah.
Because the actual sound, they said the velocity, because it did it under their window as well. It did this sound, this howling roar that sounded like a cross between a lion, they said, or a tiger and a dog under the window. And they were absolutely terrified. And apparently it's taken a lot of years for the husband, who would walk home in the dark from where he'd been working or whatever. I'm choosing my words here because I'm definitely not going to betray these people's confidence. Not that anybody can pick anything up from that, but I'm just going to respect him, because the first time I spoke to him yesterday, and it's took him years to actually walk in dark since that episode. So we can sort of take from that whatever we want. We can say, well, the overactive imagination, that they've let things get on top of them. They've lived there a lot of years. And never heard anything like this before. The dog had never acted like that before.
Yeah, I was going to say,
the weight of the animal. Now, I'm not going to say bipedal for no other reason than that was a question I didn't ask. So I'm assuming that, but it was doing it under the window, this God Almighty screaming, howling roar. It says, and after a short time, it left, and they heard it in the field. It sort of went backwards, its traces, to a woodland where they first knew where they'd heard it. So terrifying for if you were there, not so terrifying maybe as I'm retelling it, because I'm not saying, oh, they looked out at window and they saw this incredible thing, because that didn't happen.
Well, sometimes it's more frightening when you can't see what's causing the
exactly
noise.
But yeah, really good. So Deborah says, what, Paul, do you think that the beast picked up? I think that I didn't get to that, Deborah. You can see these questions, Chris, obviously, because I think you're putting them on screen. I didn't get to that in the conversation, because I do plan on speaking to him next week face to face. And the fear projection, the kind of the focus of the dog obviously, the dog obviously knew that this thing were there, obviously perceived that it were putting something out, even if it were half a mile away in a woodland. That little Lakeland Terrier knew that this thing was projecting something, and it connected. And I think this thing, and we're only surmising, we're only speculating, but I think it connected with the energies of the dog as well. Because why else would it? Because I've touched on the fact that there are other properties very distant. Why come under the window of that property? Why did the dog act so out of character that night, stood on the end of the bed looking out of the window, absolutely fixed, before it had even made this noise? So there is some kind of intermind connection, even if it's animalistic, between these two animals. I don't know.
Could that have been an infrasound occurrence, do you think, perhaps?
Perhaps,
as well
yeah.
as
Yeah.
And the dog's picking up on that. Because so often, I know we talked about when I came and we did that bit of filming for Wolflands, and we were in the forest and we were talking about the fear projection, weren't we? And incidents with, I mean, we can't jump to the conclusion that it's a dog man.
No.
Right, but let's put it in that category for now. And those incidents with the dogmen or the werewolf, whatever terminology you want to use, there does seem to be a fear element there, doesn't there? A traumatic fear element, and they do seem to come upon the witness more so than the wild man Bigfoot type sightings.
Yeah. It does appear to be something that's fear based, with an ending that doesn't end in bloodshed and massive trauma to the witness. It's almost as though whatever it is in some instances actually feeding off the fear. That's what I get from it. I've been looking at a few things, what they're looking into at Skinwalker, and do they call it the hitchhiker effect, where people complete strangers have. In fact, I emailed George Knapp about this yesterday because he mentioned something to me. And I want to talk to him about it. We had strangers have gone to the area, gone to Skinwalker. Strangers, that's not the word, is it? But people who aren't researching it, people who've just been invited to the area, and they've taken something back with them. Now, that's happened at Bempton. Without a doubt, that's happened at Bempton. And I can think we can see kind of correlations there, you know, and I can think of one prime example with my daughter, Gemma. And when she was staying here and she came to Bempton one night with myself and Bob Brown. And at the time, I didn't connect it thinking, oh, that's got to be Bempton. It's only since listening to George Knapp talking about this hitchhiker effect that I'm thinking, yeah, that could be it. Because this particular night, I'm sort of looking out to sea with cameras, trying to film these elusive lights that you've managed to see, Chris. And there's the distant hillside, and Gemma's got a powerful torch, and she puts it onto something on the hill. And she said, oh, what's that there, Bob? It's be about 200 yards away, maybe not even that. And he goes, oh, it's a white square on a board on a fence post. Of course, penny drops with him. There isn't one there. So he puts his torch on it, and immediately this white glowing square, if you picture somebody who's running and they have them little white belt things on with a number on, but just white, about that size, that's what I'm saying. Just dropped at floor, they said. Just literally dropped at floor and disappeared. So that was that instance. But that night when we went home, I sort of, I don't know, go to bed 11 o'clock. Me and Mary, she stays watching TV. She's in that little room, little TV room. You've got a front room, and then you've got the hallway, and then you've the back wall where the sofa is in our hallway. It's not attached to another house. That she said, I stress this in case anybody wants to say, well, it could have been next door or so. She said, I heard a noise and I thought it sounded like thunder at first. She says, no, knowing Gemma, there'd have been a swear word with it, what that kind of thing. So she says, and then I turned TV down. She said, and then suddenly there was a growl. And she said, it was so loud that everything inside me started to, I could feel it. It was reverberating like bass. She said, it was terrifying. And it weren't thunder. It weren't, the TV were turned down. It weren't anything else but an animal growling right at the back of my head. She said, and that's what it was doing. She said, I were absolutely terrified. She said, and I thought, my dad will come through in a minute because he's bound to have heard this. You know, somebody's got to have heard it. It was so loud. Well, I never heard a thing. And I'm a light sleeper, a very light sleeper. I never heard a thing. I mean, she said, and I sat there for ages, didn't even move, and then went to bed. And then she told me about it in the morning. And is that just some kind of coincidence that some strange occurrence happened, or are we dealing with what they're terming the hitchhiker effect? I think we probably are. You know, when we go up there and not necessarily just Bempton, but along the eastern North Yorkshire coastline, if new people tend to experience things. I don't know whether that's because they're going and the mind's open and they are going with anticipation and a kind of excited wanting. I don't know. You know, maybe me and Bob have been going up that long, and Steve Ashbridge, that we know it's going to happen. We know it's capable of happening, but we're not seeing it as often as we want to see it. Do you know? I don't know. It's a difficult one. When I took Lee Haywood up, once again, we've got the areas of high strangeness all over the world. And we've identified one here in East Yorkshire. But I think there's specific locations within the area, concentrated locations. So where Gemma saw this white glowing square, but she put torch on it, it looked like it were glowing. She thought she'd just highlighted a board. Because it literally was a square. I didn't see it. Bob saw it and she saw it. But where she saw it, a few yards further on, Bob Brown took a picture of a strange anomaly on hillside.
Oh, I've seen that picture. Yeah, it's strange.
Yeah, and in broad daylight. I mean, once again, I'm probably in the same position. I'm always looking out to sea. And I turned around and said, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm just taking a picture of a kestrel or a bird of prey up there. He said, and this thing's just appeared on hill. So I've took a picture. I hope I've got it. And he's got it, whatever it is. And I went straight up there with Gemma. So it's all around the same time. It might have been a day before, a week before, but you know, the timestamp photographs. So we've rough idea when. So we walked straight up there. We weren't. It don't take 10 minutes. It literally takes 2 or 3 minutes. We're on hill looking over, and we're just looking at farmland. Nothing, no houses, nothing. So what he'd seen and what he's captured on his camera, I don't know. But at the side, this is more about the concentrated areas. At the side of that is the hill sort of rises a little bit more, and that's where the rock angler said in 1998 the spaceship landed. You know, yeah. Just below it, in the field between the hill and where me and Lee Haywood were, is this where we saw the huge sphere of light that lit the ground up below it, not in the sky, not on the hill, in the field with us. I mean, Lee went up to Lee's a brilliant guy, you know, but he went up to explain what I was looking at. He's
yeah, I remember speaking to him. He went to disprove.
Without a doubt, he went to disprove it, but not in a. I like people like Lee because he didn't do it. It's not sarcasm. You're talking a load of rubbish, but he thought that these things could be explained by afterburners or some kind of military exercise, and he's just in total disbelief. I said, "How big do you think this thing was that we were looking at, Lee?" You know, because we've added segments of these things in for Wolflands, what me and Les Drake are doing,
right?
Just to highlight the strangeness surrounding. You could turn it on its head. You could do a documentary about UFOs and encompass the cryptid sightings, just to highlight the strangeness that surrounds
absolutely, yeah,
the multi-phenomena events. So Lee said, about as big as a VW Beetle, but round. So it's big and it's in field with us. And as fast as I'm getting camera around, this thing's dissipating and it's gone. But incredible, the best thing I've ever seen up there. But once again, take Lee up. First time he'd ever been up. We're going along Cliff Lane, driving up there, and he goes, "What do these things look like then, Paul?" And it sounds corny, doesn't it? And I looked out at window, and there's one there, says like that. and he's looking at it and thinking. Well, so he told me afterwards. He says, "I'm thinking, well, I don't really know what that is. It's like a bright orange but it's not illuminating like a flare, and then it just implodes." And then Lee got documented times on them all, and yeah, interesting place.
You know, it's funny you should mention that, because I think that there is some form of, I don't know whether Steve Meara mentioned it on your show, but speaking to Steve about negative magnetic anomalies. So he investigates the positive, but also the negative. And in these negative areas, there's a lot of suicides.
Yeah.
When you look on the world map of these areas, more often than not, there is something negative. Now, it might be a place where they make arms and weapons. It might be a suicide spot. There's always some sort of form of negativity. Now, it just makes you wonder whether they charge these areas or whether it's historic and it's always been there. Sounds to me like it's probably always been there. Certainly the guy who we had in Bringing Down the Light, the MOD guy, said to us that there was a portal there. Now, is that something to do with it? The negative or positive magnetic, whatever it is that's causing this? It has to be, doesn't it? There has to be some sort of connection there. It
could be, Chris, you know, and a lot of the things that have happened up there are pretty negative. Now, we've got to also take away, highlight the fact that it is a bird sanctuary, part of that area. So in the summer months, it gets hundreds, if not thousands of visitors with cameras. So, you know, because I've had people saying to me, well, you know, they've all got cameras, and a lot of time, these people who are into the bird spotting have got really expensive cameras with massive, powerful lenses. Why haven't they filmed anything? Why haven't they seen anything? Well, I can tell you they have. they have done. But the bird spotters, where it doesn't, I mean, earlier, what year? I think it was August 2020. Not bird spotting, but a professional, an amateur camera club went to Flamborough Head, and they wanted to do some low light photography, time-lapse photography. I don't know enough about it. You know more about this than me, Chris, but it were 30-second exposures.
Yeah, long exposures,
and I'll be using what the picture that this guy, Brian Lancaster, is kindly allowed me to use, and he allowed me to record him because I wanted him to give me a 20 to 30 second segment, because I can say anything. I can say that we're taking on a 30-second exposure, and the audience, the listeners tonight, will think, yeah, well, you could just say that, Paul, couldn't you? And he's explaining why when he's captured. He said, first of all, he went to just film the cove of North Landing, and he set his camera up, pitch black night, camera on a tripod. I think he'd got a remote to take the picture. 30 seconds, he said, and I start taking the picture. And about 8 seconds in, forgive me if I'm wrong, because he might have said 11, but this orange light appears. He said, and then a few seconds later, another one appears at the side of it. He says, and I said to people with me, bearing in mind, he's the tutor. He's not one of the people in the club. He's the guy teaching the people.
Yeah.
He says, and I get to about, he says, there's 3 lights there eventually. He says, and I get to about 28 seconds, and I'm thinking, take the picture. And it took the picture. And he's got them, these 3 lights in the picture. Now, to me, that picture is gold. Now he's explained it to me, because he said, they're stationary. They're not moving. They've not come from anywhere. They're not traveling, else we'd see a trail as it's taking this picture. So we've got, for me, some kind of validation when I get the experts who tell me that I'm looking at afterburners and tell me that I'm looking at Chinese lanterns, and just tell me basically I'm mistaken, or it's a meteorite. That photograph is validation. And that's why when we do the talk, or when I do the talk for the Awakening conference, the Chariots of the Gods, I'll be using that photograph, and hopefully, because Brian's allowed me to do that little bit of recording, he's going to be telling people why. I could tell them I realised that, and it probably wouldn't, people would believe me. But I just think it stamps a little bit more truth onto it. It's only a photograph. It's not the smoking gun. It's not a landed UFO with aliens waving to people. But it's an explanation to why we're not looking at meteorites, afterburners, and swamp gas.
Well, with the nature of those lights up there, actually, I was speaking to Jerry today, and I was going to try and create an animation to demonstrate for people listening to this and people that listen to Truth Proof. I was trying to demonstrate how those lights appear, because it isn't just they don't just appear in the sky. That's just it doesn't work like that. This sort of, like you just said, then they implode.
Yeah.
They sort of burst into our existence. So I was trying to do some sort of animated orb to demonstrate and show people what we were talking about, because once you see that, it can't be mistaken for some sort of jet or afterburner, certainly not an afterburner.
Yeah.
Or anything that, I won't say man-made, but anything that we're familiar with. Let's just say that much. And the idea that guy got these on camera and they stayed in one position, I wonder if they did that on purpose, because I just look at how many of us, 7 of us went up that night. They appeared for us just like we said they were going to appear, and I took Jerry and Mark with her, and it were almost like they were putting on a show for us. The jets came out, the F-15s came out with it, and so I wouldn't put it past those lights, put it on a little display for that photography group.
Well, are we looking at something then akin to Skinwalker, where the phenomena, we'll just call it the phenomena, the intelligence behind the phenomena is reacting to some kind of emotion, to some kind of thought process, because there's so many similarities. And this guy, what were the chances? What would the chances be that he's taking one picture? He's not gone looking for UFOs. He's just not. He's gone to take these low light photographs using 30 second
long exposure, and it's a beautiful place, so that's where you do it.
Yeah, and what is the chances in one photograph that these 3 lights will appear in this one lit up, another lit up, third one? He says, and I'm thinking, stay there, don't fly away. He says, 28 seconds. He said, they're still there. He says, I think they said they actually blinked out before the photograph finished, but he's got them. Do you know what I mean? And
it's a great photograph.
Yeah, so
that's on your website, isn't it? For anyone that wants to look at that, that's on your
truthproof.uk website. And do you know, people might look at it and think, well, it's not that impressive. But when the context of how it was taken, I get people say, I'm no graphic expert, as I'll be hand up and say. But I get people sending me photographs. You'll have seen them, and you'll see a long streak in sky, and they're saying like, "Oh, this is an oblong UFO," and then you'll look below it, and there'll be some street lights or house lights that are referenced, and they're kind of slanting as well, and it's motion blur.
Yeah,
and I'm usually polite, and I don't tell them that. I just say, "Oh, it's an interesting photograph, and thank you for sharing it." But that's all it is. But they want it to be a UFO. They want it to be some cigar-shaped UFO that they've filmed or taken a photograph of. But that's different. This guy's photograph is absolutely first class, and it's a great example. And that's why I'm always up there, or as often as I can be, with the little Psionics camera, with the thermal camera, with the Sony, hoping that I can capture something that people are going to go, yeah, he's got it. We can't, unless he's faked it, you can't deny this.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's the trick, is to just be out there with all the kit you can carry. And ironically, Jerry just said to me today, he just said the minute we put the cameras away, out they came. And that's such a, it feels like a little bit like a get out of jail card free, doesn't it? Mm. There's a number of cards that we often play.
It's a trickster. Do you know?
You're right about that. Yeah.
We went to. We stay with Mick Sigson, the rock angler who saw the UFO land in 1998, and I don't know where the footage is. I don't know if you've got it, Chris. We didn't use it, but not that it matters if you've got it. I can't remember. I can't find it. But I went up there and filmed him. You weren't with me. I filmed him.
Yeah, I've got it.
Yeah, have you? That's interesting. Well, I might want some audio off it. Well, that's all. But anyway. I went up with Bob Brown, so you know what it encompasses, and I'm asking him to tell us what he saw on the hillside. Did you film it as well, Chris?
I can't remember.
No, I think it was me and Bob. But anyway,
Bob, yeah.
what did tell us? Run us through it. This UFO that landed on the hillside, and he's in this fishing match, and he says, I turned around and I thought, there's a combined harvester on hill. What's it doing up there at this time of year? Because it's November. Then he sees light sky between it. I'll sort of skip through that because that's not my point. My point is, I'd asked him if he'd seen the orange lights, and he said he hadn't. We put the cameras away, and two appeared in sky above us, and I pointed them out to him. He looked, he goes, "God, good God, what are they?" I says, "They're what I've just been talking about." So I got the camera out. They've gone. Stand there like a fool for 5 minutes, 10 minutes with Bob, and we'd agreed to bring this guy to the cliff tops to film him and take him home. So we didn't want to hang about. I'd have loved to have stayed longer. Nothing. Put the camera away, walked a little bit down the cliff path. They appeared again. Get the camera out. Gone. Thinking, oh God, So I put the camera away. We walked back. They appeared one more time. Didn't even bother getting camera out. Drove him home. There appears to be a trickster element to whatever's happening. And I personally don't believe I'm ever going to get at the bottom of it. I think
you know what? I've got a sneaking suspicion that you're probably right. But I'll tell you what I remember about the ciggy, Mick Sigson, the case. Do you remember when we were doing the follow-up film, weren't we? I can't remember the name of it now. Superliminal, yeah. And we interviewed him in one of the flats above your house.
Yeah.
And he was more concerned about weighing his fish.
Yeah, that's
at the
true.
end. I mean, it's absolutely no one. Do you know what? If I didn't have that on video, no one would believe you. But he actually says there's a UFO. He looks up. There's a UFO spinning, all the lights, all singing and dancing above him. The sleet's coming down, isn't it? And he said, I just wanted to get back and weigh these fish. Now that is mind blowing.
Yeah, he said we'd got a weigh-in and I had to get back for weighing. He said I could see it. He says, and I got to my car. He says, and I looked for it on lane as I drove away. I looked for it, but I couldn't see it then. But he had to get back for weighing. But you see, everybody's got different priorities, aren't they? I'm stood on edge of them cliffs many times with Bob Brown. I mean, last week there were 7 of us. Steve Ashfish come and a few others, and we saw nothing. But we're stood there, and them rock anglers will think, they're idiots. They're fools. What are they doing?
Yeah.
What are they doing? But they're doing what they want to do, and I don't really judge them, Chris, because we're looking at it from our point of view. If you would have stuck a camera on it, even in 1998, you'd have got something spectacular with cameras of the day. If you'd have been that close to that thing,
absolutely, yeah.
No, you've got a bag of fish. You needed to weigh them. Just,
And maybe there's an element of this trickster or these, whatever they are, whoever they are, whatever they are, that know this. They know that there's that these guys are not interested.
Sorry, Chris, fire away.
You sort of, the more interest, certainly me. I mean, if ever you don't want to see anything, just invite me. Usually, I mean, that evening there were 7 of us. It must have been some other guy must have caused that, because it wasn't me.
Before we move from that, Chris, that this is another element to it, where I'm up there all the time with cameras. You've got cameras. You're hoping to capture this, and all right, I got a bit of footage of them that night. But Jerry had got a camera, I think. You'd got a camera. Mark Farnell had got a camera.
Everyone had a camera,
and I think I probably got the footage because I were really keyed up to get them, and I knew how it would happen. You guys were probably waiting, and by the time it had happened and got your cameras into gear, it were over. You'd know now. Do you know what I mean? Because you know the formula, how they appear. But before we saw them, we looked down onto the cliffs, onto the rocky shoreline below, where nobody can access, by the way, because it's just treacherous. You just can't get round there. And there was a glowing sphere of light.
Yeah, I remember, yeah.
And I'm looking down at it, and you said to me, are you looking at that as well? We've got cameras in his hands. I never picked camera up to take even try. Your mind's trying to digest what you're looking at. You're doing what everybody does. You're looking for the logical. Is that what is that? What's reflecting down there? That silver ball that I can see down there. You saw it. Mark Farnell saw it, I think, didn't he?
Yeah, I think we've just got to make a habit now, and this is what I try to do, is just have the cameras running. And often, especially up there with the cold and the batteries and the moisture up there, you don't want to leave the camera uncovered because of the North Sea and the salt and everything else, because you've got expensive kit up there. So there's that to think about. I mean, you've got asbestos hands. I don't know what's wrong with your hands, but our hands were falling off. We'd been there.
My hands were cold, I've got to admit. But I knew I do it now. I have the camera ready. It's usually tucked under my coat for the very reason that you say. Because, sometimes you've not got moisture on camera. And I'm sorry if we're boring people here with talking about cameras. We'll jump to what you want to hear about in a moment. But when you get in a warm environment, it suddenly becomes wet. Do you know when you've exposed it to the extreme cold? As soon as you go into indoors, the camera becomes wet. I mean, I've ruined one Sony, and it's great that we've got the little Psionics, because they're pretty good water protection. The only drawback I've got with them is they don't show the true color of the object you're looking at. But one thing compensates another. They're not massively expensive, and they can see in the dark. So it's a good thing. Do we have any questions, Chris, from your audience?
What is my personal best evidence for cryptids in the UK? This is probably a long answer. That's a really good question, and it's really a difficult one, because you can't really get past the anecdotal evidence, can you? I think if you speak to all the cryptid researchers, it doesn't matter who it is, I think they're always going to come at you with anecdotal evidence, because it's pretty much all we've got. And I did a podcast a few weeks ago, and it's yet to go out, and we were talking about evidence, because the Americans want to know about evidence. What have you guys got? Have you got DNA? Have you got prints? And I had to be honest with them. This type of research really is in its infancy, isn't it? We're barely scratching the surface. And as you've seen in America and Canada, when you do have the DNA, they'll find a way around testing it. The labs don't want to know. None of the scientific community want to touch it. So for me now, there is a little bit of a genuine comeback to these to skeptics and scientists, and that is, it doesn't really matter what you present as evidence. If it's a photograph, if it's the Patterson Gimlin film, well, it's a man in a suit. The top special effects guys have already said that it's next to impossible at that time, for 50 years ago, or more than 50 years ago, to do that, to produce an effect like that. And obviously, the strange thing about Patty is the female is the assets. That element of it is very unusual and extremely well thought out. If that is a hoax, I mean, there is an element of doubt with me, because, and it's only a small one. I wonder, similar to the Todd Standing footage, I want to know where the before and after film is.
Yeah,
that kind of thing. Just because it's just a genuine question. In the UK, I mean, I don't know whether regarding that question. Sorry, I can't see the question. Lauren, could you put that question back up, please?
What's the best
I don't know. Yeah, the
you've
cryptids one.
seen?
Sorry, love. The cryptid question. Just I don't know whether or not he's seen the film Elusive, and that's got the tree shaker video in it. Now, the tree shaker video, for those familiar with it, is the footage that a guy called Bigfoot Tony took purely by accident, and he's filming what looks like a stick break, and in the background you can see this tree blowing in the wind. It looks like it's blowing in the wind, but none of the other trees are blowing. And at the base of the tree, he said on the footage at first he thought it looked like a gorilla, and it's got hold of this tree and it's shaking the tree. So if you haven't seen that piece of footage, check it out. It's on Elusive. Elusive is on. It's been renamed by the Americans. It's now called Elusive Bigfoot Abroad, and it's free on YouTube. So you'll see that clip of whatever that is doing that to that tree. It's very blob squatchy. And even now, I spoke to Jason Parsons, Bigfoot Tony, about that, and we're not. It's inconclusive. We're not sure about it. If anything, it could well be pareidolia, but it is a strange bit of footage. And so, in terms of video proof in the UK, that's probably the best I've seen. In terms of like actual cryptid accounts, I'd say that the accounts that you and Deb Axel took are probably much more credible, and there's a lot more detail there. So yeah, so if that answers your question, sorry, I waffled on a bit there, but yeah.
No, you didn't, Chris, and it were good to hear. And you know, there's a question that I often ask myself, because everybody talks about all we've got is anecdotal evidence, but when is it going to be enough? I mean, some people will just put their hand up and say, well, it'll never be enough. But, I think people know what I'm going to say. When you've got people, different individuals, different backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds, different ages, loads of different mindsets, but they've got one thing in common. They're coming to you and they're telling you that they've seen something that's very similar all the way down the line. When does anecdotal evidence become valid? And I think we need to, that really needs to be discussed, and because they can't all be lying. They can't all be misreading what they're looking at. There's a reality to what we're looking at. Why is it so? You've just talked about elusive. Why it's so elusive, and that's the full spectrum of the unexplained phenomena. I don't know. Is there a set of laws in the universe that makes this have to remain elusive? Are there certain firewalls, should we say, within the phenomena that make it impossible for us to get any further? It's possible, or plausible. I really don't know, but there's got to be a reason why ghost hunters never really capture anything concrete. We do see vague things, and I'm not disrespecting people who do hunt for spirit or look for ghosts, because I think, like we've said, there's a connection. But why people who look into the cryptids don't actually get them on film? We just get a fleeting glimpse of something because that's all we've got. Why we've not got the actual structured UFO? They all share one thing: nobody's catching them with any degree of accuracy on film, audio, anything, are they? We're not doing it. So there's got to be a reason. So either everybody's just imagining it, and the people that are telling the stories are all telling a load of lies, or there's something inbuilt within unexplained phenomena, some higher echelons of intelligence, that there's a firewall there that's preventing it. And that's, I don't know. Why are people seeing these things on the first visits to these areas? They're being given a glimpse, but that's all they've been given. And all they've got is the imprint in the mind, so they can talk about it, but can't do no more. All we can do is just spread the word.
Yeah, it seems to me where the cases where you do get good evidence. Let's take poltergeist activity for as an example. You often get very good images and lots of good video, and it's almost performing for the camera. And there's an element of that in ufology, I think. Not so much, obviously, with the cryptids, but there is an element of that with the UFOs for sure. And it makes you wonder whether from my experience of the witnesses I've spoke to, there does tend to be, if there's a relationship there between this individual, a group, and the entity, whatever entity it might be, a ghost, poltergeist, alien eating, whatever it might be, they do tend. Do you know what it's like? It's almost like a little bit of a trade-off. It's almost like you get closer to us and develop this relationship, and we'll give you a little bit of something if you're interested in showing it. And do you know what? I have come, and you've probably come across a lot of cases where people do have good photographs and good evidence, and they're not interested in sharing it. And that, to me, says a lot, because it says, one, I don't want the press, and two, I don't know what the payback's going to be for me personally if I start showing this stuff around. And I don't mean Men in Black and any of that. No, I mean from the phenomena.
From the phenomena, I would totally agree. And there was an element of that with the first account the first thing that I talked about tonight, and the unearthly sound and the terrifying moments that couple shared, and that they've carried these things for a long time, and I sensed that there was an element of that in it. Almost, I didn't say this, but almost as though, are we going to revoke something or revive something that we didn't want reviving? Yeah. And I don't suppose, and that's why I'm keen to keep the identities really sort of low key. Some people are quite happy to go with it. Do you know what I mean? I spoke to a diver, a former diver. He gave me year 1984. If you want to jump to this for a moment.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, we'll jump to that in a bit, because while we're on this, the cryptid thing, I wanted to ask you, because I've spoke to Jerry today about his brother's account about that Anubis sighting.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's strange that, how you were mentioning the footsteps.
Yeah.
Well, Jerry's younger brother, this is about 1980, when he was 12 years old. One of his sort of practices that he used to do before he went to sleep was, he used to lie on his bed and out of the window. They live down south, so in the warmer in a warmer climate, in like the summer months, he would leave his window ajar. And it was one of those. It was a strange. Jerry said it was a strange window because it had a hinge in the center.
Yeah.
So the window sort of was, when it was half open, when he looked into the reflection in the glass, he could see outside.
Yeah. Yeah, no, because it pushed out. Yeah.
Yeah, because it pushed out. So, and then there was a street lamp, and he could see the street beneath. And he used to play this game with himself where he would hear the neighbours. So it might be a car pulling up, and it might be a door slamming. It might be footsteps. It might be high heels. But he used to play this little game where he'd say, "Oh, I know who that is because I recognise the sound of the feet." Anyway, this particular night, Jerry said that his brother had heard these weird footsteps that he just did not really loud, thudded like footsteps. And it was so strange that he sort of panicked. I thought, I don't know that noise. What is that? The next thing he knows, this thing has jumped through the window. Now, when I say through the window, it didn't slide through the gap in the window. It came through the wall and through the window. Next thing, he's paralyzed. He's on his back. He's paralyzed on his bed. And this, what he describes as an Anubis, is stood in front of him. He can't move. He's trying desperately to scream and speak, can't. And he describes it as its skin was black, like charcoal black, and its eyes were black. And an interesting element to it is that he said that in its hands, they were slightly webbed. He saw like slight webbing on its hands. All this time, obviously, he's 12 years old. He's absolutely terrified.
Yeah.
And he's managing to bang on the wall. So he's managing to move, and he's banging on the wall. And the next thing he hears his mum coming up, running upstairs. And the closer she gets, the more control he gets over his limbs. So he's banging louder and louder and really panicking. Next, and then this thing's just literally just disappeared.
Just vanished.
Out of nowhere. But he did say, it's obviously terrifying, but he told Jerry, he said, at the time I was terrified, but I never thought that it would harm me. And that's to describe it as an Anubis. What the hell is that? And it just reminded me of the case that you investigated.
That's right. Well, it's a strange one, isn't it? And like you said, what the hell is it? And I'll jump to that in a moment. But what intrigues me the most is that Jerry's brother's like listening for noises outside when he's not asleep, and he's trying to hoping he's going to get it right. Oh, that's so and so's car coming up because I recognise the sound of that vehicle. But it's the fear that came with it, and he's focused on something. And I think there's once again we've got this intermind connection. And maybe if it weren't that Jerry's brother was so focused on his surmising, speculating, but on on something or someone out there, this thing might not have connected with him. I don't know.
Yeah, good point.
But the story I got, excuse me, is this guy's working. He's living at home. Normal semi-detached house, close to Hornsey, which is not far from me. And he goes to bed like he would do any evening after work, maybe have a beer. I don't know what he's done, but he's gone to bed. Wakes up in the night, and as he's looking, something akin to Anubis walks past his bed and through the wall, and there's another one behind it, and he can't believe what he's looking at. Certainly he's not. Well, you'll know why he's not dreaming if he's telling the truth in a moment. So he's upstairs, by the way, and it just walks through the wall and disappears. And the second one walks to the wall and turns around and looks at him, walks to him, and he says, because this guy is in prime of his life and still a very fit, youngish guy in his late 30s, but in his 20s he had an heart attack, and obviously I'm not disclosing a name, but he didn't say why he had an heart attack, and there's still, like, I won't say a mystery, but people don't know why he had this sudden heart attack. He said it walked to him, looked over him, and put its hand straight into his chest. And I don't mean there's blood. It literally went into him, and he had an heart attack. And walked. I don't suppose he saw it walk through the wall, but it disappeared. And then he ended up, obviously, in hospital. He's had an heart attack. He's okay now. But that's the story. And somebody else, this guy who's hung on to the truth of his experience for many, many years. Who's going to believe that? I mean, there'll be people sat listening to this thinking, God, you can tell a good story, Paul. You know what? You've really made a good one up there. But I know somebody's told me this. But that's where it's at, you know, because we're not just dealing with unexplained phenomena, poltergeist. Somebody claims they've seen something like a werewolf or a Bigfoot. We're taking it up a level in a way. Something looking like Anubis. One's walked straight through a wall upstairs in a room and just vanished, and there's another one that's done this. There's so many elements that are kind of working on lots of different levels, all encompassing what we call unexplained phenomena. It's fascinating.
Excuse me. And you might say as well, I mean, I guess you could say for those that follow cryptids in this country, or in any country for that matter, that you do tend to have the Bigfoot or the wild man, and then you've got these ever increasing accounts of dogmen in this country and across the world, actually. But there's also accounts that you've taken with bizarre entities that don't fit that sort of description, really. I mean, look at can you tell us about the one that beach encounter with the young lad? I mean, he must have been absolutely. I mean, everybody that sees something must be terrified, to be fair. But on that occasion, at that time in the early hours of the morning, late at night,
it was coming up to high tide, just after midnight. I haven't got the times in front of me, and I always say this: it's almost like a safety net, because I might have spoke about it on a podcast and said it was 12:15, and it probably was, but I can't. I know it was after midnight, so. Yeah. He's fishing. There's a raging sea. There's an absolutely massive sea sort of on. So he's tucked himself against this little wall to protect himself from the wind, and got out away from the big waves. And he says it's coming up to high tide. And they call this guy Lewis. In fact, I do want to get him on film telling this account at some point. But he said, I'm doing my thing. He said, now just look to my left. He said, on the beach, there's a figure walking up the beach along the shoreline where the waves are crashing. He says, and I can't believe it, but it's so slim. It's completely black, pencil thin. He said, and I asked, I said, did you see discernible hips or breasts, meaning what it's very slim female? He said, no, it was just a very slim, solid black outline, not an extra large head or anything, but just absolutely, its shoulders looked only as wide as its head, and it's walking up the beach. He said, and I'm watching it in disbelief. He said, and then I thought, I'm going to stand up, partly because I want to just release my legs a little bit. I've been sort of crouched down. He says, and as I stand up, this thing stops. So he's assuming it's seen him, and it literally, in his words, pixelates and disappears. And this guy becomes terrified. It's a 10-minute journey at the most to his home. His dad had dropped him off, and he rings his dad, come and pick me up quick. And he says, and I'm putting my fishing gear away, just throwing it in this little box, and I've got my knife, as in not a knife to hurt anybody, a filleting knife if he catches fish, holding it. He says, and I think it's there. This could be paranoia. He says, but I think it's there. I think it's watching me. I think it's next to me. He said, and my dad arrives, and I tell him what's happened. And here's where I wish I'd got the times in front of me, Chris, because let's assume it was 12:15. Someone tells me it was 12:37. His dad arrives, and he'd rang his dad right away. He'd rang his dad within not even minutes of seeing this thing and putting his things away. And his dad arrives 10 minutes later. But when he gets home, there's something like an hour and 10 minutes different time differential. So I've got the times, and it makes perfect sense, because I've got this guy's account in complete detail. I should have had it in front of me, really, so I could have told you the time difference. And I think there's an hour and 10-minute time difference from when he thought he'd rang his dad to when his dad arrived and he got home. So there's the missing time element. Plus, their property has a lot of glass. It's a detached place with a lot of glass around it. I'm assuming. Well, I did ask him. I think it's like one way, so they can see out, but nothing can see in. And he started shutting all blinds for weeks afterwards, because he thought it were watching him. He believed this thing had followed him and were watching him. So yeah, it is an interesting account. And I should have been a bit more prepared with that, Chris, and I could have given you.
No, it's all right. I mean, obviously you've still got to speak to him, so you probably get more detail if you get a chance to speak to him, because I know that's been going on for quite a while, and I know you've got quite a few cases like that. Well, here's a case, and every time I talk about this case, I can't help but laugh, and I shouldn't laugh, but I remember the case you were telling me about, the about the little dwarf type creature, and it's more so what happens to it. So can you tell us about that?
It was two men, and I believe they'd been lamping. As in, I don't know if anybody knows what lamping is, but it's not something I advocate, by the way, but it's hunting with dogs. So you'd put a light on a rabbit or something, rabbit freezing headlights, and they let it go. That's the side element to the story. But they'd been lamping, and they're walking. And he says, and in the grass, this little man or little figure comes out, about, I don't know, not even a foot tall, and he's looking at it, and he went, ugh, frightened him. I've spoken to that guy. He says, and he just kicked it into edge, just booted it. That's as much as I know about it. I mean, that's a crazy little thing.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but
you to ask me that one.
all I can see is this thing steps out in all innocence. It could have just wanted to say hello. The next thing, it's getting
he kicked it. Yeah, kicked it
into edge.
Into edges. Yeah. So what happened after that, I don't know. But it's quirky little stories, aren't they? You know, but
just to be a bizarre case. So I guess at this point we've probably got quite a few questions building up. So Lorraine, who's my wife, is moderating tonight. Lorraine, can you put up a few questions if we've got any, please?
Oh, that'd be good. Have there been any more reports from Danes Dyke? I did speak about it on Truth Proof live stream, but you know, for people that haven't heard it, we got one on November the 15th. I ended up in other part of Danes Dyke, the part where not many public go, and there's a guy down there on his own. It turned out he'd been doing a bit of metal detecting, but that's up to him. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but he were down there anyway. And I got talking to him. And I think the easiest way in for me when I'm talking about strange occurrences in Danes Dyke, at Flixton, in the forests or anywhere, is to ask people if they've seen the black cats. Because it's becoming the norm now, I think, that everybody accepts the fact that these cats are here. And they don't have to be of a paranormal nature. These cats are here. They're very elusive. They're very secretive, but people do see them. So that is a way in. And I asked him if he'd seen anything unusual, and he told me that he'd not seen anything about regarding the cats. And then he went, but hold on a minute. He says, what date is it? And that's why I knew the date. And I said, it's November the 15th. And I looked at my phone. I says, right. He says, well, say it was a month ago today, because it will have been about a month ago. He says, and I'm in here. He says, I've done my thing. I think he said the bus was about 5:20 in the dip at Danes Dyke. The dip, incidentally, where the guy driving home on nights claimed he'd seen the creature looking like the American werewolf in London, the bus stop. So it's a nondescript bus stop with a few miles either side of nothing. So it's just for the people who visit the Dyke if you've gone for a day on via public transport. He said, so I get to the bus stop. He said, it's just getting dark. It's just starting to draw in a little bit. He says, I'm changing my sort of boots, my sort of walking boots, to some decent footwear. He said, now to the Dyke, a huge dog just comes out of the Dyke. He said, I asked him the colour and he couldn't tell me, I said, its eyes were sparkling. He says, and I was taken back. He said, he didn't look aggressive. He said, but its eyes were sparkling. I said, well, what colour? He said, I don't know. He said, but they were sparkling. He says, but this is the thing, and I kid you not. Oh, he described it as being as big as a Great Dane, but thicker set and grey coloured. He says, I kid you not, and that's not a word I use, that's what he said. He said, its face looked half human. So I've just gone there. The guy does not know me. I could have been anybody, do you know? And I've asked him about the cats, and we've just got this story. I said, would you mind if I record you? And he let me record him telling me the story. And it went back down. And he said, I was so intrigued. He says, my bus weren't coming till 20 past. He says, and there's nobody about. He says, it came out of the dikes, kind of looked at me and went back down. He said, I was so intrigued. He says, I went and had a look. He said, but there was nothing to be seen. And, that's a new one, newish. It's November, isn't it? October the 15th, he claims he's seen it, or around about that date. Now, it's intrigued me enough. I don't know whether it's foolhardy. I mean, there's plenty of people go around at night. I know they do ghost hunts in Danes Dyke, or they go looking. There's an alleged white lady, spirit of a white lady seen in Danes Dyke. That goes back in old books. It goes back, 18th century, even further probably, that people claim to have seen this white lady. And I've spoken to people, let's just stay with white lady for a moment. I've spoken to people that have claimed they've seen it, but when you get the nuts and bolts of the story, they've seen a spear of white light. But it's our human perception is we want to turn it into something that is a ghost. So we go from a ghost to a person. And that's how it's gone with that one. And the ghost of Big Railings at Bempton, where the guys say that there's a ghost of a man down there, but they're only seeing a white light. They say he's got an headlight on, and they're seeing his headlight. Lots of the fishermen have seen this, what they call the ghost of Big Railings. But get to the bottom of it, it's a spear of light. I'm not saying it's not a deceased spirit. I'm in no position to say any one way or the other. But what I am saying is it's not the figure of a person. So, I mean, since then, Jason Davis, who did the cover of Night People, came for a few days. I don't know, about 6 weeks ago. And I took advantage because Jason is a fit, sort of healthy kind of guy. So I thought, right, this is the kind of bloke I want to go around the dike in the dead of night with. And we did that. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And we did a bit of a walk around the dike and spent some time there with thermal camera and everything. Didn't see nothing. Nothing occurred, nothing untoward, no hairy moments, nothing to frighten us. Don't say with Bob. I mean, but I've got to be careful with Bob Brown. Everybody knows that Bob can talk to me. But Bob's 75 and it's a bit unsteady on your feet at times, Danes Dyke. You've been in it, Chris.
It's dangerous for anyone, yeah.
Yeah, so he's honestly, staying with Bob for a moment, there's nobody deserves more credit than Bob, because if I said to him now, after this show, whatever time it is, 9:30, 10 o'clock, Bob, do you fancy going up to Bempton? He'd just say, give me 5 minutes, and he'd come. He's a diamond. But right, fire with your questions, Chris.
Yeah, I'll answer this now because I know Rob, but Rob's in the chat. Nice to see you, Rob. And Rob's mentioned that, ironically, the next thing on the list to talk about is the fairy, and we'll get to that shortly. But I'll tell you about a case. I don't know if I mentioned this. I may have mentioned this a while ago, but I once went to my wife went to the chiropodist, and I went with her, and it was near where she used to work. And it was just an appointment. We were only going to be there half an hour, and we go in and we sit, and she allows me in with her while she's having this appointment. And she says, well, what do you do? And it always comes up, doesn't it? And sometimes you're happy to answer. Other times you just deflect it, or you just say, I'm just a filmmaker or a minute. Anyway, so I happened to tell her, I said, look, I make films about weird things, strange things. And the next thing, she proceeds to tell me this story about when she was a kid. I think she was in the backyard, just playing as kids back then, because there wasn't a lot of electronic, similar, I suppose, when we were kids, really. There wasn't a great deal of electronic games or any of this stuff that there is now. So she's out playing in the yard, and the next thing, she notices this little pixie-looking thing, and I think it was on a flower or a tree. And she said the strange thing about it was it had its back to me. And she said it looked like it were made out of wood. It looked like part of the tree. It had that sort of tree texture to it. She said, but the more scary thing is, when she saw it, it turned and looked at her. So it turned its head and looked at her. But when it looked at her, it had this look of shock. She said the shock on its face. And she's presuming that it wasn't expecting... One, it must have known she was there because it must have heard her. But I don't think it expected her to see it. So again, we're looking at that element was, what is it that triggers this sight? Is it a pineal gland thing? Is it a zone thing? Who knows what it is? But whatever it is, in this case, that fairy, or what we'll call it the fairy, whatever it is, did not instigate that sighting.
No.
And it might be something to do with, again, people not having, not losing that magic as a kid, and all the disillusions and potential calcification of pineal gland, if that's a thing that you hear about. So yeah, I mean, that's a strange. I just thought, what an amazing sighting, and it just goes to show that we're in the chiropodist, and this woman has got a story about a fairy pixie type thing, and it just makes me, every time I get a case like that, it just makes me think how many more people have got accounts like this.
You took the word out of my mouth. Do you know that they're everywhere? Everybody, I would say every family. No, I wouldn't say every person, but most people have got a story like that. There's some people that see things, and they're still they don't want to talk about it because they've spent that many years disbelieving and ridiculing other people that it's like almost like having to step down. There's that factor as well. But that what you've just spoken about. Can you remember when we were doing Bringing Down the Light and we spoke to Lee and his wife? I'll not say his wife's name because we can connect them and they might not want to be known. And she'd got a photograph of what she said was a fairy, and she she just let us sort of glimpse it. She said, because I believe that if we show it, because they'd seen it a few times, hadn't they?
Yeah, I'll just tell the story.
They'd be betraying it if they showed it to us, and they thought they'd never see it again.
Yeah, really strange. And for anyone that's not seen Bringing Down the Light or is not familiar with the story, Paul and I were investigating a case of a family that were experiencing any number of things, from hauntings to poltergeist type activity, entities, aliens, whatever you want to call it. Everything you can think of, this guy was experiencing. And on this one particular day, he'd gone out into the garden with his grandson. And ironically, he had built in this beautiful garden, he had built this 7-8 foot door, hadn't he?
Yeah. Just butt in at this moment. You finish the story because I know where you're going with it. But need to say that this guy's I'm a joiner by trade. This guy's an absolutely amazing craftsman. and he'd built a door just like you'd see on an ancient church, a solid oak door, really heavy, and he'd set this. He's got a very large garden. He'd set it out inside this enclosure. So you carry on, Chris. Sorry.
Yeah, well, there's not much more to the story other than to say that he had his grandson in his arms, and he just said to his grandson, and I think he's probably old enough to just about understand what he was saying. He said, "So, shall we see if the fairies are home?" And they knocked on the door, and then this what I can only describe as a fairy. I know it's a bit Disney-like, but it's what we would perceive to be a fairy. So, Lorraine, could you put that clip up for everybody to see?
Amazes me every time I see it, Chris. Because 100% back you up. He did say to us, I knocked on the door. He'd made a big iron door knocker, hadn't he? And he said those exact words that you said. So it weren't staged. This guy's really genuine guy. You know, invited us into his home, didn't he? You know.
And I know people. I think when we showed that at the Awakening conference, and obviously it's still in low resolution here because this is a 1287-20. We can only look at it at that resolution, but there's just something about its movement, isn't there? First of all, it isn't a midge and it isn't an insect. I can tell you that for a fact. I'm a compositor by trade, and I know that is not a fly. And I know using an iPhone lens, I can't remember what model it was. It might have been a 7, perhaps, years back this now. That is not a fly, and it is not a midge. Now, that's not to say that it couldn't be something else, some sort of strange light anomaly. I don't know. But what I do know is I would put money on that not being a midge or some sort of fly. Because I've seen comparisons, and I've said this before about the Manchester University lecturer, that he took some photographs of something similar, and he was and people came in and tried to debunk him, and even their photographs were not anything like what he had photographed, but they were certainly nothing like what that is. And it's the movement of it, isn't it? Have you noticed its movement is very, very strange, certainly not like that of a fly.
And when you look at the stills from it, Chris, you're almost looking at feet and knees and an upper thigh. I know we can shape it and make it into what we want it to be.
Yeah,
but
of course,
I don't think it can lie when you actually look at some of them stills from the image, you know. But it's always going to be up for debate, isn't it? But the point is, how ironic then? What an incredible coincidence when he goes, "Shall we see if the fairies are in?" And
I mean, again, I never thought about that. I mean, that's a really good point to make. What are the chances? And that's not the first time. I think in the same place when another family member came round, something whispered in her ear, didn't it?
Correct. Yeah.
I can't remember what it said now, but that family have got so many. I mean, you could do a documentary just on.
I were actually that was on my in my mouth to say, actually, you know, because they've got so many interesting experiences, and the professional people as well. You know, they've got responsible jobs, and you know they're not out to make a name for themselves with any of this. I mean, they allowed me to put trail cams in that garden. They were there.
Right, yeah.
I left them for weeks. We didn't get nothing. You know, we didn't get nothing. But isn't that the nature of it?
What I will say very quickly, just for the purposes of that piece of footage, although it's copyrighted to you and I because of bringing down the light, we don't own that footage. What it is that we can't identify the people, so I can't name them on the copyright. No. So it's their footage. They've just allowed us to use it in the film, and I think whatever you think about it, it's thought provoking. Let's just say that much.
Yeah.
And you don't often see. I mean, if this was such a common thing, this is another thing. If this was such a common thing with bugs and flies, and every man and his dog having a camera in their hand these days in the sunlight, when have you ever seen anything like that captured? We should be seeing that week in, week out. I wander through the woods where there's insects flying around all the time, and I've never captured anything like that. That is not a bug. No. So anyway, I've got to get that.
There'd be a word for it now, and we'd get people saying, "Oh, you've captured the fairy phenomenon." Do you know what I mean? People often mistake, but it's not there.
Essentially, yeah, similar to the rods type phenomena and the time thing. Yeah, and the rolling shutter issue. Yeah. Oh, I was just going to say, Captain Daz is Daz is in the chat. Yeah, I can answer that. I mean, this. I think people know I'm notoriously poor for my sightings and that could well be because I carry a camera around with me everywhere I go. And that could well be the reason that I don't see many things. But this orb that I saw was about the size of a tennis ball. And the day before, I had been to the Isle of Wight to see David Icke, and I'd spent a couple of days filming with David. And actually, on that trip, we were the day... We had to cancel the trip, right? And we moved it forward, I think, 2 days. The day we were meant to go, the ferry bridge collapsed and 6 cars went in the sea. And you'll be able to find that. If you Google that, you'll be able to find it. Isle of Wight ferry accident. And we would have been on that ferry. And it was, I mean, probably just a coincidence, but just weird. Anyway, I come back. I go home. My wife was away on holiday with a little one, and I was on my own, which is quite rare, really, because we do if we go away together. Anyway, I'm sat there on the laptop checking my emails because I've been away, and I look up, and there's this orange tennis ball size, bright yellow orb, sort of like about 4 in the length of the room, so about 5 meters away. And I think I said at the time when I spoke about it, at first I thought I was seeing some things. Because I had to rub my eyes. I was sort of like rubbing my eyes and saying, what is it that I've just seen? Because I didn't know what I'd seen. Anyway, it disappeared, and then it appeared again briefly, and then just disappeared. So what that was it connected to where I'd been and what I'd been talking about? Who knows? But it's rare that I see something, and so when I do, I remember it and I look at the circumstances. So yeah, it was a strange one of the. I say, do you know what? I say I don't see that much, but I've seen probably 3 or 4 things over the years, and some people never see anything, so I probably shouldn't say that. And I've just seen, has someone just sent some money? That's crazy. Thanks, Ben. You don't need to send me money, mate, but if you insist, I'll take it. But that's very, very kind of you, mate. And I don't know what to say. I'm a bit shocked. Well, I'll buy a beer. I'll buy you a beer, mate, when I see you with that. So, next question. Any views on? Ooh.
I haven't got any views on it.
No, to be fair, it's a strange subject. What I will say is that I'm not one of them people that will sort of rubbish things that I don't know about. But what I do know is, I think that I won't say the words because there's a bit of a thing on YouTube with those words and the censorship around it. So first of all, the censorship around it's very interesting. That's what I will say. Why are you censoring something that's so ridiculous? That's not to say I believe it, but when you look at the things that surround the subject, it's very interesting that certain things are off limits. Why are there no? For example, it's always puzzled me that we went into space allegedly, 60 years ago, and no one has thought to put a camera on a rocket from the ground to the moon. No one's ever thought to do that and film it. Why have we never seen that? Why have we never seen a full rotation of the Earth live? Why have we never seen it sped up, a time lapse? Never seen it. And in this day and age, there is no excuse for that. But I think to me, all that says is that they're hiding something. And there's probably a lot to hide, so I'm not surprised that they're hiding things from us because just look at what your local council hides from you. Never mind what your local government had and black budget operations. So yeah, and
that breeds conspiracy and theories, you know, and like you said, Chris, I mean, I've just said I've got no views on it, and I haven't really, but I'm not knocking anybody for their theories and their views, because who am I to say that when the things I talk about? But yeah, you can see why. Some of the examples you've just given are the reasons why we get some absolutely outrageous theories and speculations put out there. And it
could possibly be it. I think you raise a good point. I think it could be that it's not necessarily that it is what they're saying it is. It's what comes off looking into the subject, because once you start looking at that, you open up, and it's very similar to, I suppose, a lot of aspects of our world, the alternative world. The minute you start asking questions about any of this stuff, you're gonna get conspiracy theories that pop up, but you're also going to get genuine queries and questions.
But flipping that, do the restrictions on looking at this information that as we say, the authorities, the powers that be say as have no importance, yet there's massive restrictions on it. Is that a deliberate ploy so that we will get people coming out with ridiculous theories to muddy the waters of the genuine witness, the genuine people out there? You know, there could be some of that in it. But you can go on and on and on reading this one argument counteracts another, doesn't it? Yeah,
absolutely. There's one for you, mate.
I would love to know why there's EMF directly over the guardhouse at Nick's exploration. Exploration. Well, you know this firsthand because you've had some experience with the drone flying around that area, and it just doesn't want to know. And EMF readings, tri-field meter readings, not necessarily on the base, because as anyone knows, I discourage anybody from going onto that piece of land because it's privately owned. So that's not what I'm about. But we're getting unusual readings all around that area, and they're so random. You know what I mean? You could go there for a week and nothing happens, and then the EMFs are going off the scale. The tri-field meter, Bob's bought quite a good one, and that's doing the same. I took Peter Masters up with me, a friend of mine, an electronics expert, and he's got some incredible gear linked up to laptop, and we've taken it up there, and we've found this solid band of energy just at the back of the base, and he can't explain it, and it's omnidirectional, as anybody knows, up, down, sideways, to the ground. But it's there. We've got quite a lot of experiments. Now, he's the technical guy. I'll be the guy that's talking about it and writing it up, you know, because in every field, you know what I mean? I don't expect somebody to tell me how to put a roof on when I've done it all my life. This guy, I'm not going to encroach on his knowledge. But he's coming with us, and he's going to share his knowledge, and we're going to go to various locations. We plan to go to Rudston Monolith. We plan to go to Speeton. All areas of eye strangeness to see what readings we're going to get, to see if we've got any similarities, should we say, and to see whether there's see if we're in the areas of magnetic anomalies, which you touched on earlier. You're on about the negative magnetic anomaly and the influence that could have on people. So we've got loads planned. I mean, I don't know about you, Chris. I don't know how your day pans out, because I know you're working most days, but your evenings, I bet they're consumed when you're not with Lorraine and your little girl. I bet they're just consumed with people sending you things and information, because I know mine are. In between doing this, I were doing sketches for Wolflands, illustrations, and it's non-stop. I get up at stupid o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, and I'm writing things up. That's why it were brilliant. Great to get the book done, but brilliant when it was done. But it just seems just as intense now. We just never stop. We've been editing today. It's just absolutely full on all the time. And I'm not moaning either, by the way. I crave this information that people give me. But you have to have a cut-off point, don't you? You have to step away from it at times, otherwise it'd drive you nuts. And I don't know how you feel about that. Is it 100% focused on the subject?
Say that again, Paul. So
are you 100% focused on the subject? But you must have.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. It's difficult not to be. And do you know what? I've found and we've talked about this before, and I think something happened. I can't put my finger on what it was that happened, but it's happened before, and I've heard people talk about this before. And I've noticed that when you're working on something, sometimes when you're working together with people and you're heading in a direction and you're getting things done, sometimes something crops up, and it could be something and nothing, and it can totally disrupt either the job you're working on, the friendship you've got. It can, or something can happen in your family, something not accidental.
Mm.
If it happens once, then it's an accident. If it happens twice, then it's all right. It's a coincidence. 3 and 4 times, and I know so many researchers in this field that say something. I think that, like we talked about earlier, whatever these things are, and there are multiple different types of these things. I think however they're influencing, they're able to influence events, your mood, your investigations. I think also the opposite of that, in a positive way, I think they can bring people together.
Yeah.
And I think they make people meet. And I think a lot of my research into this, where I met you and James Bartley and Alice Taylor and other researchers, they've all been strange, coincidental meetings, almost from nowhere, that have really developed into something that's become a really big part of my life.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That is a strange. The work wise, you just can't get it. Once it's like very few people walk away from this subject once you've been in it. No, I don't know if I could walk away from it.
It's because it's so. It's not quirky. Is not the word. It's so different to anything else. And there's a reality to it, one that you just can't quite touch, but you know it's real. You know, all the things that happened to me in childhood, I've got no proof of it. I've got scars on my arms, scars on my back. But I mean, you could also get, well, you probably wanted so much attention that you shoved I don't know, a piece of steel into your arm. Do you know what I'm saying? You're also saying you've made it up, but you just can't. There's so much. Once it's been ingrained into you can't stop looking into the subject. And there's so many good people, just particularly at the moment, involved in the subject, and they're probably been like that year in, year out. But I see this, as I call it, the multi-phenomena research. I see more and more people going down that road. And I don't mean to knock the nuts and bolts UFO guy or the ghost people, but I think there's been too many years where people have just focused on one thing and not allowed the other aspect of unexplained phenomena to enter their sphere of knowledge, their particular interest. And I think they've missed a big trick, Chris. I know I've jumped slightly from what we were talking about, but it's a multi-phenomena subject that we should be involved in, and we should be encompassing all of it and taking on board everybody's views. Like the subject of flat Earth came up. I'm not saying that I subscribe to that, but it doesn't mean that you've just got to just kick them people into touch. Everybody's viewpoint is worth listening to until you form your own opinion that, you know, I'm not going to deal with that. But
yeah, you're right. I think with all of these mysteries, I think no matter what the mystery is, and I think there's usually an element or a useful piece of information to be taken from it.
Yeah,
because I think all these different subjects, the mechanics behind all of them, I've talked about this before, are very similar, and there's definitely a connection. What that connection is, that's the big. I think you figure out that connection, mystery over, as far as I'm concerned, and I think that's the difficult part of this. So anyway, we better get on to this next question, and I know I've heard you talk about this. So do you want to talk about this one, Paul?
I don't know how much detail I've spoke about this. Right. In book 4, Truth Through 4, I've wrote about a place called Fordon, which is only about a mile from Stakston and Flixton, which is famous for the accounts of the Flixton werewolf. A security guy at Fordon, early hours at morning, parked near Fordon Church. If you want to Google this, people, it's a tiny church. There's about 4 or 5 properties at Fordon. That's all there is, nothing else. He's in car with someone else. I think it's the passenger side perceives that there's movement, there's something outside. And when they look, there's they describe it as a lean 7-foot fur-covered creature with fangs. They named it the Fang Man. But the thing that gets me is they said it had footwear on. some type of footwear, and so that absolutely blows my mind. And they literally made a hasty getaway, and they moved and they parked a few miles further down, and it knew where they were. It came again. Whatever it was, didn't like check the car or howl or scream. But so there's, when we're talking about clothing, or I can't remember question exactly, but we've got that. Then I have another one, and it's a delicate one, that somebody I know claims to have seen transformation. Now, I'm not a subscriber thinking that people are turning at a full moon and you need a silver bullet to sort of combat these things, because that's the thing of movies. In the research into the werewolf stroke dogman that I've done, there's been a few accounts where people have seen it on a full moon, but the majority, it's just been some phase of the moon. But what am I getting at here? 3 people turned up. 3 people turned up at someone's house. He agreed to let them stay at their house. I mean, very carefully here, because
I remember this.
Yeah, and this guy was frightened. This guy was very frightened, but he agreed because he was friends with some other people, and they were holding some kind of meeting, shall we say, shamanistic meeting in the UK, very close to where I live, very close. And he agreed to let them stay. Now, 2 of them came, and he said you could see they'd got hoodies on, that they were dogs. They weren't covered in hair. You see the facial features. He says they looked human, but animalistic. And they were told they weren't going to get hurt. You're not going to get hurt. You're safe. And the other one said, we will show you something. And he said, bring a bowl of water. He said, and he brought me a bowl of water. I brought a bowl of water and put its head in the water. And when it lifted its head out, its eyes had changed colour and a tongue dropped out, a huge lizard-like tongue. And this guy was terrified and left the property. Now, I've sat and spoke to this guy, bottom of my garden. He's talked to me since. He's wanted, and had a profound effect. There's loads more to this story, loads and loads more. And I think it's that's first time I've touched on it. And it might be last time, because I don't want to go into any more detail, but because I know how much it affected this particular person. And yeah, it's an interesting one.
That is a
case. Believe in transformation? Do we? What I've been duped? Do you know? I don't know.
Well, I don't think you were being duped. One, because I know some of the details that you're talking about, but then what happened when you interviewed him?
Oh gosh, yeah.
Which is in itself just absolutely bizarre. So for those details that happened at that place, and then for that to happen in the interview, and the secrecy and all this sort of stuff around it.
It's not even one that I'm entirely happy talking about, and not so much because of protecting identity, which I said I would do, but there's a real element of fear. The strangeness has reached another level with that particular story, and it were in my back garden. Do you know what I mean? Sat in somewhere else that I first heard about that. But bear in mind, I'd already heard about it. I'd already heard about that story. Not because somebody was quick with a mouth and telling everybody. I'd heard about that story from a friend of mine in the police force. Do you see? So interesting.
Yes, very, very strange.
Interesting, guys. And you're probably saying, well, it's not interesting because you've not told us, Oak Paul. But there's certain things.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, mate, where there are sometimes, and it doesn't happen very often, but sometimes there are things that you just can't say for whatever reason. And I think people watching this and the guys from Truth Proof and everybody in here that's listening to this, there's like 80 people in, and I'm absolutely flabbergasted that 80 people want to sit and listen to me waffling on. Paul, not so much. Me.
Don't be silly.
But yeah, thank you everybody for watching tonight, and I hope we've done it justice. And we're not done yet. We've got a while yet. So we'll get to the next question, which is from Les. Look who's here. Les Drake. He's finished his chalk ice, and Now he wants to know about views on near-death experiences. Well, this is I think that one of us or both of us, Les, obviously on Truth Proof, should do a show on this. Try and find someone to speak specifically about this, because I think this is a fascinating subject. And ironically, yet again, it ties into everything that we talk about week in, week out. Because there are so many of these near-death experiences and things that happen to people that have near-death experiences, the type of people that have near-death experiences. And sometimes people don't have one, do they? They'll have multiple near-death experiences, which in itself is quite worrying. This thing just keeps happening. I remember a case of, I don't know whether you guys out there are familiar with Danny and Brinkley. That case, I think, is from the 80s, and there's a movie with Eric Roberts, and they made a film about it, and I think it's called Blinded by the Light or something like that. And this guy was struck by lightning. He was on the phone, and the house got struck by lightning. It came down the phone and killed him. And I think he died for about, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes, half an hour or something, and came back with abilities and psychic abilities and all sorts of weird stuff. So, yeah, I think near-death experiences are fascinating. And then you can get into reincarnation, which in itself, yet again, is another, it's probably, I mean, these are great ideas for shows, actually, because this is just giving me an idea for another couple of shows where we get someone to talk about these reincarnation cases. There's loads of them, isn't there? Yeah. These young kids that are coming back to life, remembering lives, the lives in India. I remember that particular kid who, in that Indian village, he went and found his old TV shop, and he was murdered in the shop. And he took the film crew to the shop that he used to own. He said, "That's a picture of me on the wall." And he was shot in the head, and when they shaved his hair off, he had a birthmark in the exact spot. Now, could have been a coincidence, but for a young kid in an Indian village to know all this, and that's just one case. There's dozens of these cases out there. Just fascinating stuff. So, yeah, good question, Les. Really, it's a fascinating subject.
And Chris, that bit of tongue-in-cheek here, but Les had a near-death experience. Coming out of the ravine when we were filming for Wolflands, and he collapsed, and he'd be laughing and going, "Oh yeah, Paul," and you knew you'd bring that up, but but it just shows the depths that Les will go to, and he full on. He got into that spot with us and came out of it, and we were worried for a time, but he come round and we carrying on filming. We're still here, but carry on, guys. Sorry.
Well, that's when you need a chalk ice.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so next question is from Di. Hello, Di. Thanks for your question. And that is, hi, guys. Great show. What is the most commonly reported cryptid in the UK? Do you want to take this, Paul?
Well, I really don't know, but because I sound like a broken record. I feel like I do, because I'll be the first person to say I never really thought I'd ever be interested in this particular aspect of unexplained phenomena. But writing the first book, I'm getting these reports of what they call the Flixton werewolf. So, first of all, you just dip your toe in the water and you don't become vocal about it. Then you think, hold on a minute, there's something to this. For me, it's the werewolf type phenomena. But, I mean, for other people, it could be the Bigfoot type phenomena. Did I inadvertently hear that in Staxton Wold when I was doing some bit of research for the Flixton werewolf? Because I went in there and there were, I think it were 3 tree knocks right against me. And I've said it loads of times. You've been in that wood. It couldn't support anything like that. A huge fur-covered primate or metaphysical creature. It just couldn't support it. But something made them tree knocks, and there were no wind, and it stopped me in my tracks and made me sit down with a digital recorder for the best part of 3/4 of an hour, hoping it had happened again, and it didn't. And I went in again months later with one of my granddaughters, the same place, and we encountered the most rotten sulfur egg, terrible smell. Now, could it just been some kind of gas off land? Yeah, of course it could have been. Could the tree knocks? I've misled it. I misread what I'm listening to. Of course it could have. I could have done, but I just find it intriguing, and there's so many accounts come out of that area. For me, long-winded question, guys. I apologise, but yeah, the werewolf type phenomena, or dogman, however you want to term it. But what about you?
Yeah, I think from your perspective, I think you do tend, and that's probably something to look at. You do tend to get, and it could, Here's a jump, but it could well be the type of terrain where you live that limits the other sightings of the wild men, perhaps. Because I suppose where you are, would you class it as quite a flat region? Do you think
it is? But we're not far, Chris, as we've said for Wolflands. We're not far from those forests.
That's true. Yeah,
and this not just forest, but forest, moor, and very sort of wold type land, as in wolds, by the way, in ancient times, it's a term for the wilds, just barren land. But these forests encompass over 500 miles. There's 500 square miles from the coast inland. That's a massive area, and we're only like from the nearest forest. We're only like, say, as the crow flies, 18 miles, and then we've got the coastline, which is rugged and inaccessible in lots of places.
And you've got, I suppose, you've got to remember that there are other researchers, the BBR Bigfoot group, people like Mick McLaren. They tend to take sightings of Mick, particularly, and Lee Roscoe and Caroline. They take sightings of ET related stuff in UFOs, but they also tend to get quite a few wild man sightings. So when I say a wild man, for those that aren't familiar, what I'm talking about is what we might call the British Bigfoot.
I'm grinning. I'm just got.
Why are you grinning?
10 or 12 pints of beer inside them. Wild man. But no, sorry, go on.
No, it's a good point. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, and the researchers I speak to I would say the wild man stroke Bigfoot sightings are more common. But as we touched on earlier, there are differences in the two entities. One being that the wolf type, canine type beings tend to come upon the witness, whereas with the wild men sightings, it's the opposite way around. It's a human coming upon, not all the time, but more often than not. So I know that's a bit of a commonality there, but there you go. That's just my opinion on it.
It's strange because I've found myself over the years talking about the cryptids more than I talk about the UFOs. Before I'd talk about the UFOs and the strange occurrences that happened around me and my family, but it's a snowball, and it gathers. Once people know that you're taking it serious, once people know that you're actively looking into these things, they kind of seek you out because they know that first of all, you're going to listen to them with not a sympathetic ear, but you're going to be critical, but you're actually going to believe them if you think they're telling the truth, and that's kind of what it's about, isn't it? It's just hoping that the witness will put their full trust in you, or that you're good enough to put their account over in a light that makes them look credible.
Well, it's clearly working because you haven't got time to scratch your ass, have you? Most
No,
days, so you're doing something right. So next question is from Ben at 401 Files. Cheers, Ben. And this is: do you think there is more to our Fylingdales than we are led to believe?
Do you know, Ben? I mean, you spend a bit more time up there than I do, around those forests, and maybe there is. But I've regularly spoke with a security guard who used to work up at Fylingdales, and I know the guy. I won't say we're great friends, but I know him quite well. He says there's nothing there. He says there's nothing mysterious about what's below Fylingdales. But I've had similar questions about RF Staxton Wold and saying that there's lots more levels. And then I was told by the guy working up there as a private contractor, seeing that building at Staxton Wold that were no bigger than a double garage with a sort of standard door on it. And they were taking rolls and rolls of plastic tubing into this place and lorry loads of it. And they're saying literally, where would it go in? They're seeing it going in, and the building couldn't have contained half a lorry load. So there's obviously something below. There's more levels to it. And I did speak to somebody that worked in the hive who told me that I can't remember level they were on, but it was something like level 7. And they didn't realise that how interested I was in the subject, or not in the subject, in unexplained phenomena. And kind of fishing for information, they started telling me about a UFO account, or a UFO sighting that had been picked up, and then sort of clammed up when I think they realised they were telling me too much. But that's how it goes, isn't it?
Yeah, I can see a question in there. Yeah, thanks, Loren.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's easier said than done, Ancient Ruby. Thanks for the question. I think it really is a gut instinct, isn't it? I mean, there are a couple of techniques that most of us use, multiple questions, multiple times, that kind of thing.
And you don't always get it right. You know, myself and Les were doing some editing the other day, and we found some old audio from the lady and her friend who saw the creature at Flamborough Head on the cliff top on the Nab. This applies to her question. What rang true for me and Les was the audio that I filmed on the next morning when myself and Bob Brown met them. They let me record them. This was prior to filming them a year later. Do you see? The audio, her story was consistent with what she was telling us a year later. Kind of believed her when she first told us, and a friend Lee, you know, because it was so graphic, and they were both telling us this incredible story. But I actually filmed them, recorded them that next morning after they'd seen it. So we got this rough audio done on Olympus, and when we actually got to filming them, she came on her own. It's almost like it's a carbon copy of what she told me that morning. And that kind of tells you, unless she's got a script and she's been practicing it, that she's somewhere on the level. Do you know, it's a brilliant account. But it is a great question, because you don't always get it right, do you? You know, but I tell you what, just because I know we're running short for time and I want Chris to have a go at answering this, but when I was writing Wolfland, I wrote about, I don't know, 8,000 to 10,000 words of one account, because I was so enthralled by this account. Then I found out it weren't what it was. It weren't as accurate and as good as what I'd first led to believe, and I just pulled it straight from book. I've never spoke about it since, and I won't do. I won't say who told me it, but it's gone from the book, and I won't be speaking about it again. If you get it wrong, you get it wrong. If I'd got it wrong and it were in book, I think I'd have to hold my hand up and tell people. You know, I really do.
Yeah, I think you're right, and there's also another sort of misconception going around, and that's put onto us by a lot of the skeptics, is that we can't be wrong, or you can't make a mistake in this field, no matter whether it be cryptid research or ufology or contact cases, whatever it might be. Everybody makes mistakes, and it's part. You know, I mean the short video that I made about the stick signs and all the rest of it. It's a learn. We're learning as we go, sort of thing. It's a bizarre phenomena. It's an unknown. We're dealing with unknowns. So many. It's all unknown.
Yeah.
So I mean, in terms of like what you get from your witnesses, sometimes you've got to realize that your witness is just dealing with it, and probably hasn't processed it themselves. So there's that to think about on top of everything else. So I think with anything, with any case or even any idea, let's use filmmaking, Paul, as an example. You might have an idea for something, and if you rush in and do it, and you're going to hit a lot of problems. Whereas if you just have the idea, you get excited by it, take a step back, take a couple of weeks off of it, and go back to it, and you can reevaluate it. And it's the same goes for this sort of work, I think.
Yeah.
Whether it be a case or an individual. So yeah, just a bit of. How do you discern who's telling the truth? I think in the end, all we got is our gut instinct. So at this point, I just want to say thank you, Lee Roscoe. Thank you very much, mate. I really appreciate it. Mark Farnell and Tino as well. Thank you very much for your contributions. What I'm going to do is I'll get some merch or something, and we'll do a raffle and we'll give it away with the money. We'll figure it out. Any more questions, Lorraine? One for you, Paul.
Yeah, do other groups of people report lights further up the northeast coast? Yeah, they do, and we've got a great friend in Chris Wright, who lives in Scarborough, and he's got an avid interest, and he's become an integral part of Wolflands. I don't think we could have done film now without Chris being involved in it, but he regularly goes out onto the coast with his friend and Steve, and they look for the lights, and they've got friends further up the coast who will report to them, and that said, further down the coast, towards Hull. So it's not just concentrated around Bempton and Flamborough. It's all the way up the coast. And I would think the majority of people who live on the coast, wherever you are, if you look hard enough, you will find reports of these things. It's just who's up there. We're fortunate. It's a brilliant area for fishing and rock angling. So we've got people who go up there. The tides dictate when they fish, so they might go up there at 2 in the morning and fish till 5. Who's looking out to sea at that time of night? Obviously there'll be trawlermen working, and there'll be the Coast Guard on duty, but they're not just stood with binoculars all night. So most of the people are in bed. Most of the homes are inland, so they're not overlooking the sea. But a lot of the homes that are overlooking the coast, you'll speak to people. In fact, a few weeks ago, the lady contacted me called Angela from Hornsey and her husband, and they'd seen a cigar-shaped object on the cliff tops at Hornsey. It was the same night that myself and Jason Davis, who did the cover for Night People, saw the orange lights. So she contacted me. She's invited us to her home. She said, because my home, the garden goes right up to the cliffs. So a lot of the people that do have properties overlooking the sea have seen these spheres of light and various strange light phenomena. But the bulk of the people sat watching Coronation Street and Emmerdale Farm, and the people in Bempton, Flamborough, the people up and down the country who say, what a load of rubbish. I've never seen anything. But half of them are just sat watching TV soaps. And that's no disrespect to you guys that do that, but you're not going to do, because you've got to be kind of, I don't know, a bit wrong in head probably. I must be, because I spend hours and hours and hours on them cliff tops for very little reward. But I know if I'm going to see it, I've got to be there. If I'm going to film it and bring it to the attention of people with an avid interest, like the ones on your podcast tonight and on our Truth Proof podcast, you've got to be there. And if you want to talk about the cryptids, then you've got to stand in front of the people that claim to have had these experiences, look them in the eye, and if you think they're telling the truth, I think that's an important thing. You've got to actually jump off the fence and tell them that you believe that they're telling the truth. Not in every account, but in some instances, I'm absolutely certain that gamekeeper saw what he said he saw, and the guys in the forest close to Broxer, and the paratrooper. So I'm not going to say, well, it's debatable what they saw. I'm being disingenuous to them people who've put what have they done? They've put their reputation, their heart on the line to share something that's very personal to them. And that doesn't just go for cryptid reports. It goes for UFO reports. It goes for hauntings, abduction type scenarios, everything. As researchers, we shouldn't just be people who are collecting it for entertainment value and putting it out there. We should be actually engaging with witnesses on a level where they know that we believe them. Yeah, and that's where I am. That's where I want to be with it all the time, to be honest with you. If I don't believe them, I'll still talk nice to them, but I just won't write about it. No, I won't say them either.
Yeah, you make a good point. I think just a comment earlier I saw, Paul, about I think it was Ancient Ruby, who sounds to me like it sounds like a female. If you're not, then apologies. That is seen at a dogman. So if you want to speak to someone about that and you're interested, speak to Paul or I or any of the other researchers out there. We'd be happy to hear your account.
Can I just say that when that name come up, that's the one that asked the question and provoked me to talk about the bowl of water.
Yeah.
I actually thought that they knew that story instantly.
Oh, right.
I could be barking up wrong tree and barking. Sorry for the pun, people, with the dogman. But that as soon as I saw that question, that came into my mind, and I thought it's almost tailor-made for what I'm just about to say. Do you know? But
yeah. Well, I'll tell you what we've not talked about, and we've got a bit of time yet. If you're all right.
Yeah.
Let's get on to Wolflands, because I know this is like, and I know how it feels to be starting work on a film that you plan for being at the most maybe a year, and then it turns into 2 years, and then more reports come in, and these reports probably need embellishment and all the rest of it. So how's it going? It's
absolutely brilliant. We're on it most days. Les me and Les, we've had his arguments, just like me and you had his arguments, doing them. And I can fall out with myself. I'll be the first person I can look in the mirror and say what you're looking at. Do you know what I mean? but what I'm meaning is, me and Les kind of understand each other, and he knows if I'm not in moods because we get interface up and we're doing the editing. Les is doing the bulk of the editing, people, not me. I can suggest things and see things, and he's good enough to say, yeah, that's a good call, Paul, and I appreciate that because I realise I'm doing something right. I'm doing all illustrations, I'm sourcing witnesses, but it's a two-way thing, just like it was when me and you worked on Bringing Down the Light. And Les has put in 110% effort into what he's doing there, and I've ultimate respect for him. He's doing some brilliant things. Like in the hour before show, I got it wrong, guys, and I was sat here at 7 o'clock waiting. So I did an illustration which will be painted for Wolflands. It looks a bit bleak at the moment, but we've got all these illustrations which, as you know, Chris, I mean, I'm not a filmmaker as such. I'm sort of learning this process, but they're all getting fitted into witness description, and it's a massive jigsaw. It's absolutely packed with information, and obviously I think it's taking a lot longer than I think either of us thought. You know, we could have just done a talking over the table, having a cup of coffee, witness kind of documentary, and then just going to the next one and going to the next one. But we've poured hours and hours, weeks and weeks just into a 4-minute section. I'm rambling here, Chris, so you stop me. I'm just.
No, you're right. You're right.
You know, we've included a little bit of Tony Dodd's research into Wolflands. Why have we done that? Because when the gamekeeper Jeff was working there in the mid to late 90s to 2002, Tony Dodd were actively researching fatalities. That's as close as I'm going to say it, because we got a bit of stick on one of our YouTubes for saying the wrong words. Fatalities in Dalby Forest, which is just a few miles from where the gamekeeper was. He was looking into animal deaths. Can you get it, people, why we're saying it like this? At the same time, and strange creatures in the forest. So I think it's relevant because the gamekeeper saw something highly unusual, but never the two met. Do you know what I'm saying? So, but jumping to what I'm getting at, we got Taylor's dummies, which is what the authorities said these fatalities were. And we've done the scene. We've done the scene from 1996/97, made stretchers that are relevant to the day, put the full white suits on, got somebody to help us make the film, got a relevant vehicle from the time. And good God, it's massive. For me, it's massive because I never knew when I looked at a TV program just how many elements. It's just a big learning curve for me. Les is on the ball with it. He gets the short list. But yeah, so long-winded. It took me about 4 minutes to not tell you much, people. But yeah, Wolfland is going great. Thank you.
And are you still getting sightings coming in now?
Yes, yeah. Still getting reports, but we can't do any more. We've got what we need in that film, and it's spanning from this coast right up to Skinning Grove, which is up the top end of the coast, but along the north and eastern North Yorkshire coast, and we've got a sighting there, and that's basically where it'll finish. But they're all close to these forests. Yeah, everything's close to the forests, so it's an amazing. I love it. It's amazing. You can tell why I'm talking about it. Nothing's dulled my enthusiasm. Well, apart from when I'm sat in front of that screen watching Les and I putting it all together, and that kind of dulls me a bit, but that's not his fault.
Well, yeah, the thing is, it's one of those where you do want it to. It's a bit probably similar to the writing the book. You do want it to be over, but you know that if you rush it, you could potentially ruin it. And I'll tell you what, I'm excited to see. One, I'm excited to see the film, but two, I want to see the reactions of not necessarily the Brits or even the Europeans. I want to see the reaction of the American and Canadians, because I think that says a lot, because I've been really surprised with the reactions that I've had. And clearly over there, the amount of interviews that you get for Coast to Coast and all the rest of it, and it might not all be cryptid related, but they are very much interested in the cryptid phenomenon here.
At the top at the beginning of the show, as I said, I'd got an email from George Knapp asking me if I wanted to go on Coast. Have I got out I want to talk about? And they love me to talk about the cryptids. You know, I haven't confirmed anything, but I will do something about Wolflands. So yeah, there's a massive interest from the American side for what's happening in the UK, without a doubt. Yeah, just massive.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we're coming to the end of the show,
yeah,
and we've flown through 2 hours. I don't know what you think.
Well, we had a few questions to talk about. I think we might have had 15, and we've probably used about 3.
I don't know whether there's another question in there. Let me have a look. No, we're okay. So, what I want to say at this point is we're obviously Truth Proof 4's out and it's doing very well. But if people do want to buy the actual book, which I know most people do want a physical book in their hand, and surprisingly, most people, not most, but a lot of people still want the DVDs, don't they? So, Lorraine, if you could put the link up, please, on the screen where people can. So, first of all, in regards to bringing down the light, that DVD is available at Paul's website, which is truthproof.uk, and it's available at don'tmentionthereptilians.com. Either of those, you'll be able to get that. And also on Paul's website, you'll be able to get hold of all of Paul's 5 books, the 4 Truth Proof books, and the book about Paul's personal experiences.
Yeah, so that'll be on the truthproof.uk website.
Yeah, and also along with that, you'll be able to, on Paul's website, you'll be able to keep up to date with recent sightings, and you'll also be able to see the photograph that Paul was talking about, which is it's an incredible photograph, really.
It is, put into context, it is, but after explaining it, Chris, it is, I won't ramble because I know we're at the end of the show, but
that could be on one of book covers going forward, or who knows? Or if you ever do an album.
What, singing?
Because we know you like to sing. I mean, if you want to just hang around for a little bit, I can probably get some music in, and we can. I mean, maybe we can do that one evening. That's an idea. We'll do that on the next show. So I mean, going forward, obviously this has been show number 1, but the plan for the last transmission is, although I'm sort of like the primary presenter, if you want to call it that, there will be shows where people like Paul come on and co-present, because one, it takes a little burden off me, because I think Paul said this before, we can't know everything about every subject. So if you've got someone in there that has a little bit of knowledge in there to help out, and it just adds a bit of dynamism in. So I know I've got a few people lined up that are going to host some of these episodes, and it might be once every couple of months. It might be whenever something crops up. I know that you guys are always happy to help me out. And likewise, if you ever need me to help out on anything, I know I've got Ben from 401 Files lined up. Future guests, I've got a number of guests lined up. Some of them are in the chat. So going forward, I'm really looking forward to it. So the show will be bi-weekly. So it's going to be every other week. But that's not to say that if I do get a chance, I might pre-record something. Now I know you do a show every week, and it can be quite. If I didn't have the job, I mean, I just work too many hours. To be fair, I work a lot of hours, and I don't want to promise people something and then not be able to deliver.
Yeah, I find it difficult. I really do. You think it'd be as easy as just connecting with somebody and saying, "Do you want to come on show next Thursday?" But you do have to do a little bit of research on them and ask a few questions, and have a bit of information ready in case there's nothing to talk about. And it's not, you're not a never-ending pot of information. And you know this anyway, Chris.
Yeah, and it's one of them where, I mean, for the most part, I'll if I am going to get someone on, I'll do my best to make a show of it. And as you know, if you're getting seasoned people on, they do the show more often than not. They do the show for you, don't they? You just have to, I mean, like yourself, Steve Mear is the same. You just wind them up and away you go. You got a show. But I want to, with the last transmission, I wanted to make it a little bit more inclusive, and I wanted to mix it up and maybe get a few experiences on. I mean, I do want to get some big name people on, because people like that. But I also want to bring new researchers and new experiences on the show to talk about their experiences.
Well, before you close it down, why don't we put that out there now? Because it'd benefit me as well. If anybody within the chat knows any potential guests personally who they could contact with a view to coming on Last Transmission or Truth Proof, go for it, because it'd probably help me a lot. I know that anyway.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps it might be an idea, Paul, where if you do that, line a show up, because I mean, hopefully there might be witnesses out there that can do an hour show or a 2 hour show, because they've got that much. But sometimes we're going to have people in there that have only got one experiences, and that might allow us to do a show where we have 10 people on. And I mean, it'll take a bit logistically, it'll take a little bit of organising. But I think this format is very informal. It's loose, isn't it? I mean, you can fly by it, and we can wing it one way or another with that type of show because people have come to expect it. So yeah, it's a good idea. I think and there'll be more ideas like that to come. I think. I'll tell you one thing. We will just before we go. I know you're gonna have to shut me up, but just before we go. And we could probably talk about this next time. And I don't know whether you want to talk about on your next show that we are talking about doing a map, aren't we?
Yeah, oh, yeah, definitely, yeah.
So I know you'll see behind Paul that Paul's been working on his map for, since bringing that. So at least, 3 years maybe, perhaps?
That's correct. But we're talking about some kind of interactive map that will be there for other researchers to share and call on and pour their information into as well. Quite a big task, really, and we've got a few people, because it's not just going to be something that me and Chris are doing. It'll require a few people from different areas to get involved with it, and I know Chris is keen to get on with it, as am I, but I think it's too big a job just for two of us with the amount of commitments that Chris has got, and myself included.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's a massive undertaking. And I've just seen Dean Coolin in chat. Dean, don't worry, mate. I know you're late. Just listen back to it. I think you probably enjoy the show.
Oh, it's Dean there. I can't see chat, but hi, Dean.
Yeah, and Dean's one of the guys that's going to help us out with that with his background. Yeah. So I think logistically it's a massive job because we're not just trying to put sightings together, are we? We're trying to put sightings together and very specific pieces of information that are in categories that people can look at, and then they can correlate it with other sightings that they might have, for example, and then they might want to share that. So it's really a collective effort, really, to do something in detail.
And it's a database, isn't it? It's not just a map, is it? It's a database, but it's one that's going to be. We don't want to just hold it. It's going to be for everybody to use and everybody to contribute to if they've got valid information.
Yeah, and we're not under any illusion. I think at first we talked about this a while ago, and then we talked about it again, didn't we, recently when you were filming for Wolflands? And I think when we actually went home and thought about what we were trying to do, it overwhelmed us a little bit because it's a hell of a job.
Yeah, well, we've actually sat down and done a few hours of discussion with Dean and with Chris.
Chris Meek from Scotland,
in Scotland, because you want people placed in all these areas to be able to gather this information. That's what we were saying. It's a massive job. It's not just a matter of pinning tail on donkey and saying this happened in East Yorkshire and that happened in Leicester. It's we want to gather valid information and where people, like you just said, Chris, I'm repeating it, that people just can access and find correlations all over UK.
Yeah, like you say, I think database is probably the word for it, isn't it? Because we'll be looking at compiling lots of, which still to work out exactly the specifics of the details that we think are important. Because how long's a piece of string?
Mm.
You could take every single detail of a sighting and it'd be as long as your arm, and that's a hell of a lot of work for someone.
I just need to give Deborah Singleton a little plug here because she's started a database along with Don from all the reports from my books, which we put onto truthproof.uk website. But I think Deborah Singleton would be an amazing asset to what we wanted to do here. Yeah,
for sure, absolutely. I mean, I was watching. Speaking of Deb Singleton, I was watching Codes the other night, and they had Kaz Clark on now. I think you should get her on Truthproof, Paul.
Yeah.
Now it's an interesting case, that Penturk incident. I mean, a lot of people are trying to debunk it. I think there's something in it personally. I think it's a fascinating case. But definitely another. And there's no end of people to speak to, is there? So
no, this is true.
It's good. We'll get through in between us, I'm sure. Right, well, we better bring this to a close. And thanks very much, Matt, for being guest number one. Let's hope there's a guest number two.
Yeah, that's good. I'm going to do what the newsreaders do now.
Yeah. It's good night from you, and good night from him, and everybody that's contributed financially and that's contributed with your time. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope I haven't waffled too much, and I'll get better at this. Just bear with me. So the next show will be hopefully in a couple of weeks, and I'll try and get that guest lined up, and we'll get it out there for you guys to share around if you don't mind. So thanks very much, everybody. Hope you enjoy the show, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you.